everybody know that the session is being recorded. And in the Community Advisory Committee for Special Education, we read this statement every single time. It is from Cintya Valid, a performance and disability justice action organization, local. And I'm going to go ahead and read that. All bodies are whole. All bodies have strengths and needs that must be met. We are powerful, not despite the complexities of our bodies, but because of them. We move together with no body left behind. This is disability justice. And to kind of settle us into the space, I'm going to play a video for all of us.
Hey, Cynthia, real quick, just want to do an interpretation check.
Great, Molina just joined us. I'm pausing the video. Thank you, Cynthia.
Thank you.
Okay,
so we
go
don't
ahead.
need to give instructions. Yeah.
Yeah, because Marina is very familiar with how to use the service. Welcome, Maruna. Welcome. Everybody who just joined us. Let me go ahead and turn that on.
Hola.
Hola, Marina. Voy a aprender el servicio, okay? Let me add Cynthia.
Hi, Cynthia.
Hi, welcome.
Hello.
Good to see you.
Thank you. Good to see you too.
So I'm going to go ahead and start it, okay?
Mhm.
Okay. So interpretation is on, and the video has captions, Leilan, but as soon as it stops, we should turn on the caption service too. So here we go.
Disability is a normal, positive part of human diversity.
There are 1 billion individuals in this world with disabilities.
There's a lot of kinds of different disabilities.
Disabled people have other important identities.
We want to have a say in everything that affects us.
We are people with disabilities building power and inclusive social justice movements.
You can't have racial justice or economic justice or gender justice without disability justice. Just like you can't have disability justice without having racial, economic, and gender justice. To actually achieve any of those things requires achieving all of those things.
When we evolve our institutions to be fully inclusive, we can build a world where all are free.
True inclusion is revolutionary.
What happened?
Can you hear me? Somebody said what happened. I hope there's no issue. Okay. And I think so reminding everybody that this session is being transcribed. So please speak slowly to facilitate access. And we will remove any identifying information from the transcript, and breakout sessions will not be recorded or transcribed. And our access check-in, reminding everybody that we work together for greater access, and the work of access is never finished. Be in the space however you need to be, video on or off, laying down, moving around, using other tools, etc. Live captions are available, so let's pace ourselves so that our words can be captured. We include descriptions of images and other visuals. We pause at each slide, allowing others to read at their pace. This is important for me as a fast-speaking individual. We take breaks to read the chat. The style of the slides and the size of the text are intentional. And please provide accessibility feedback in the chat. And thank you, Leilan, for monitoring the chat for us. I have not looked at the chat yet, so let me know if there's anything I should pay attention to. I want to take a moment to introduce myself for those who don't know me. I'm Cintya Molina. I'm a Boricua. For many people, that means Puerto Rican. That's the indigenous name, Borican, of our island and identity. And I also am the proud owner of an African diaspora identity and experiences as a Caribbean woman. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the mother of an African-American and Boricua autistic young man who just graduated from from UC, that was me, from OUSD. Not identified as disabled myself by others. I do not identify myself as yet disabled. And my education is in African American Studies, UC Berkeley, and Ethnic Studies. I have been a disability justice and education advocate since 2009. Those who remember Tilden Elementary and the struggle to save that school, that was my watershed organizing experience in OUSD and many that followed. And I have worked in OUSD at schools and centrally since 2005, supporting families, family engagement work, family literacy, community schools manager work. So that's who I am, a bit of me. I want to thank people who have been involved in this process, colleagues, Melisha Lindsay from the Office of Equity, Special Ed at the Office of Equity, strong ally of our work. Samantha Fenwick, Office of Equity, and Jamal Muhammad, Office of Equity. And they're not able to support the process today. With that, I'm also extremely grateful for all that they have done so far. So I want to make sure to thank them. And right now, if you can take the opportunity to introduce yourself in the chat. And these prompts are invitations. There is no compelling anyone to introduce themselves in whatever way, but if you would like, please introduce yourself by your role. Are you a parent, a teacher, a staff, especially as it relates to disabled students, if you provide specific support? Any gender pronouns, race, ethnicity, nationality, disability identity, or relationship to a disability identity, school, program, department, field, and what brought you here. So these are invitations for introducing yourself. So if you could do that right now, would be great. At least share your name so that we have another way to record who was here. And Leilani, if you want to narrate a little bit of what you see in the chat, that would be helpful. Who's here?
We have Kim Tai from 3rd grade at Bella Vista, here to learn.
Okay. Do we have mostly teachers? Do we have some parents? Do we have community members? Do you have people who claim disability experiences and identities? Whatever we want to highlight from the chat.
Apologies, troubleshooting our other workshop.
Oh.
Paloma Salazar from CSM at International Community School. Luis Chavez from Manzanita, bilingual resource specialist. Anna Lee, resource specialist from Fruitvale Elementary. Meredith Stemmer from ISS at Chabot. Noel Winter, ESN SCC preschool teacher at Burbank. Raina Lau, Bella Vista CSM. Laura Young, UPA teacher. Gabriel Holman Hospital teacher. Tiffany McDermott, one of our family leaders, family navigators with SPED. Kia Walton, Elmhurst math coach. No known disability, curious, wanting to learn about supporting our students. Linda Self, speech language pathologist, non-disabled, Horace Mann Markham. Melissa Nolan, counseling and rich teacher at UPA. Presenting anxiety and depression. I'm here to learn how to better empower my students, educate my school community. Sorry, I don't know if you want me to read all of it. It's a lot. It's a lot.
Giving people a taste, and always
Okay.
never assuming that people can read the text, of course, and some people have text readers, but thank you for giving us a sense of who's here today. Thank you, everyone, for introducing yourselves in that way. And going over our community agreements. So as always, use I statements, practice self-focus. When there is something that troubles you or that you want to point out as difficult, please call in with love versus calling out with shame. Embracing vulnerability, discomfort, and a growth mindset. I'm definitely doing that today in many ways as your sole facilitator who's trying her best to be here. Maintaining confidentiality when requested. I think it is important, we share some of the learnings here, but to not identify individuals and to ask permission to share things that are intimate and confidential. Practicing mindful listening and compassion. So always pausing, asking follow-up questions, making sure that we truly understand what is being shared. Understanding the difference between intent and impact. All of us are trying to do the best we can, but we don't always succeed. And understanding how things fall for people, how they land for people, how they affect people is most important. Practicing both and speaking. Things are not either or. There's a lot of complexity and gray area. So both and, not necessarily either or. And trying things on for size. So there's a link to the full text of the agreements in this slide deck. And it would be very important right now, Leilon, to share the link to the entire slide deck. I should have done that since,
I'll drop it.
Yeah, thank you so much, since people will need access in the breakout groups. Claims at our agenda. Keeping time is not my strong suit, so I'm hoping we are somewhat within the time frame. I think we are doing really well. So we have done the opening, access and process notes and introductions, going over the community agreements, and we're going over the agenda right now. I'm going to do my best to recap our past sessions so people have a few tidbits that are important when we speak in this space. We're going to do an introduction to a disability justice platform for OUSD, knowing that it's a very detailed and rich document that can never be covered in one session, where we're going to begin to engage with it. It was something that was presented by the Community Advisory Committee for Special Education for the candidates for school board in October of this year or last year. We're going to read parts of that disability justice platform in breakout groups. We're going to share out based on a series of questions, and then I'm going to close out and share next steps. So that is our agenda for today. So a little bit of a recap. What has the 22-23 Disability Justice Learning and Action Group done so far? It's important to note that there were some pre-sessions before the spring session. In January of 2022, there was an intersections forum, a series that, and this, there is no racial justice without disability justice was a session there. There was a disability justice strategy session last September focused on centering Black students. And out of that session, the topics that for the spring were born. There was a survey, the participants made choices, and that's how we structured the spring. So in spring, we had I'm having a little time with my toolbar in the way, there we go. In January, we spoke about disability identity, culture, and pride. In February, we had guest presenters from Disability Right California, talking about the criminalization of disabled children and youth in schools, specifically disabled children and youth of color, and most specifically Black children and youth. And they shared data basically defining the problems in February 6th and case studies. And in March, they came back and talked about their organizing and advocacy to resist the criminalization of disabled children and youth. In March 20th, we talked about naming disability, the power of definitions and language choice. So when you hear words in this space, they're extremely intentional, and they reframe the way that we engage with the experience of disability and ableism and all that comes with that. So be attentive to that. On April, we went deeper with ableist language and ableist culture all around us. Ways of speaking and acting that have been normalized that are extremely harmful to disabled people and all of us. But that April 17th also included conversations around an organizing push by the disability justice community in OUSD that happened to coincide with the session. So we split the time. We did not hold the May 1st session because everything that was happening with the OEA strike. And it is unfortunate because there was a lot of content there. So we will need to return to this in the fall. So accessible, special, inclusive, ... education. What do we mean? And today is the May 15th session that was rescheduled, a disability justice platform for OUSD students. So we've done a lot this spring, and here we are. So if you want to go back and review all those materials and recordings, they're available at ousd.org/page/22346. And you can scroll to the bottom of the page and they are all listed there. It's good summer review. And in all sessions, we have begun by defining ableism, which is what we're trying to counter here in this space. And I'm going to ask for a volunteer, perhaps one who has seen this definition a lot in our past sessions, to read it for us. So waiting for a hand. Or someone to just pop on. And I know, hi, Linda, thank you so much for doing that.
Sure. Ableism, a system that places value on people's bodies and minds based on societally constructed ideas of normalcy, intelligence, excellence, and productivity. These constructed ideas are deeply rooted in anti-Blackness, eugenics, colonialism, and capitalism. This form of systemic oppression leads to people and society determining who is valuable and worthy based on a person's appearance and/or their ability to satisfactorily, brackets, reproduce, excel, and, in quotes, behave. And that's by Talila T.L. Lewis.
Thank you so much. And for people in this group, it's very important to be aware of the fact that racism and ableism operate under the same logic. It's born out of eugenics and white supremacy, creating a hierarchy of body minds that are deemed as less or more human, all organized around a fake line of division between what is considered normal and quote, quote, not normal.
Cintya, la interpretación se oye, se corta, se va y se viene y no oigo las claves correctas.
Gracias, Marina. So, Leilanda, comment is the interpretation. Okay, it's back. Great. So I'm going to repeat myself. So for the folks in this space, it is extremely important to understand that racism and ableism are interwoven, that they operate under the same logic, that eugenics, white supremacy, colonialism, etc., created a hierarchy, like an ordering of bodies and minds that are considered less or more human, all organized around a fake line between what is quote, quote, normal and quote, quote, not normal. So physical traits, cultural traits, behaviors, etc., became cataloged as desirable or undesirable. And by doing that, they were marked for containment or elimination or subjugation. So it's an entire system of measuring and ranking humans to justify the treatment that they receive. So they create narrow definitions of what's beautiful, what's intelligent, what's productive, that benefits particular people in power. So exploring the intersection between racism and ableism is extremely important as parts of the same trait. So, and I'm going to move over to the next slide, which speaks about this line in very simple ways that show up in our schools and in our communities. Ideas of intelligence, excellence, beauty, productivity. We often hear people speaking about good and bad kids, you know, and kids falling on one side or the other side of that line. We don't say ugly often, but we definitely say beautiful and draw lines that are really stark between those two. We definitely speak a lot about that kid is so smart and conceptions of intelligence that are really narrow and harsh, that puts people on one side or the other side of that, as smart or quote, dumb. And notions of fitness, of being strong or being weak. And we can definitely bring up other binaries that operate, under the umbrella of ableism and racism. So yeah, and that assign value to our children, our youth, and our people in our communities. So Mia Mingus expresses it in this way. Ableism is connected to all our struggles because it undergirds notions of whose bodies are considered valuable, desirable, and disposable. So what I put on this screen was not discussed in past sessions, but is probably the deepest exploration of these connections. It is also an interview with T.L. Lewis, who wrote the definition that was read. Ableism enables all forms of inequity and hampers all liberation efforts. January 3rd, 2023 at Truth Out. So I invite you to read that article as an important breaking down of what these things mean. So in the March session, we were focused on disability language. I'm sharing the disability pride flag because we should fly it proudly. And there's a link explaining the colors. We talked about what kind of language invites acceptance of disability as a part of human diversity and a commitment to accessibility for disabled people, and the type of language that does not, that views disability as pathology, as a problem that must be fixed, controlled, or contained. So we spoke about the medical model that acts on people as the problem to be fixed and improved, alleviated, cured, and disability as coming from within individuals. And we spoke about the social model, which is about society creating barriers and making environments inaccessible, communication, attitudes, prejudices, the way that our society is organized, producing disability, which is the social model. So, and we spoke a little bit about disability justice, taking it further. That is not about, it's about confronting privilege, embracing difference, challenging what is considered normal, and not just asking to join the ranks of the privileged, but dismantling the systems that maintain ableism. So in that session, we talked a lot about the word normal. So avoid calling people normal. We discussed that. And the explanations that come from the production of what's normal in eugenics. We talked about saying the word disabled, just say the word, and that's a link to a call to just say the word. In educational spaces, there's a assumption that saying with disabilities is somehow more affirming of personhood, and this article will explain to you in detail the problem with that. So the term disabled is not discriminatory, is not pejorative, is not insulting. It is one to be sustained and affirmed rather than eliminated and fixed. The notion of disability is not something we have to distance ourselves from. So an example is this table. We discuss how we don't distance other identities from people. We don't say person with gayness. We don't say person with Blackness. We don't say person with a gender other than the one assigned at birth. There is a claiming of identity as an adjective, as part of a whole person. So that was a long conversation in our session. And we spoke about avoiding euphemisms for disability. And euphemism is a mild word that substitutes for one that is considered to be unpleasant. So examples from our world of disability in education is special needs, differently abled, handy-capable, etc. So don't dance around the experience. It marks it as an experience that we must be uncomfortable with. So, and we spoke about identity first language, being person first, that it affirms personhood. That an example came from autistic community, in this case, Black autistic community. So we introduced everyone to change makers in the autism advocacy rights world. And they are pictured here, a long list of people that we can all learn a lot from. So in the April session, we talked about the Community Advisory Committee calling on Oakland Unified School District to stop removing students from schools to close their programs, that this is an ableist practice, that students experience this as expulsion from their communities, and that stability, continuity, and belonging for disabled students should concern everyone. That is a quote from the Community Advisory Committee. If you're not aware, programs, classrooms, spaces are being closed in a number of schools, with students currently attending those schools being removed and sent to different schools. So we discussed why the Community Advisory Committee for Special Education was opposing this practice as ableist. And there are 8 reasons on this slide deck that you can review on your own. There's also a quote from South Africa Disability Rights Movement, where the phrase "nothing about us without us" was first used by people in South Africa fighting for disability rights. And that was connected to decisions that are made in our district and everywhere for disabled people, students, children, their families, that nothing that is done for or about communities without them is for them. So we discussed that. And an update is that the resolution that would have stopped these removals was not approved by the school board on June 7th. And the vote is listed on the screen as 3-3, and noting that there was overwhelming public support for the resolution and an outcry against the removal of students from their schools, disabled students. So those who are interested can explore the issue with all the links on the screen, recordings, petitions, etc. And I feel like I'm talking a lot to recap, so I'm going to pause for any quick questions around what's been shared so far. We're not going to go into the themes themselves, but there could be some quick notes if anybody has any questions about the March session. Anything in the chat? I'm doing a pause also, Leland, to catch up with the chat so it can be read.
Just Aruna was sharing some thoughts about some of the concepts that you were sharing, and you want to share, Aruna?
Let me see. Thank you, Aruna. Collusive and interdependent, definitely racism and ableism collude with each other and rely on each other, yes. And thank you so much for sharing that. And I look forward to the long life of this space. So if you want to dig up that author, we can definitely explore it together. So the April session went into specific ableist language that we use in everyday life and sometimes don't notice. Why you need to stop using these words and phrases, an article in the bottom that is helpful for that was grounding for this session. There is a button on a denim pocket, a blue button pinned on a denim pocket on the screen. It reads in white lettering, "My disability is not your insult." So we went over outright disability slurs that are way too commonplace and a bit of their origin. And they are on the screen with a lot of symbols because they are slurs. And I'll read a couple just for reminding people, like the word moron or idiot, like the word lame, like psycho, etc. Words that connect to particularly body-mind experiences and are used as insults in our society. Disability as a metaphor for moral failing. It's very often to hear moral judgments for things being described in terms of disability, like things falling on deaf ears as a way of saying that people are being callous, unfeeling, or cruel. We spoke about ways that we talk about disability as tragedy, speaking about disability as people being afflicted by, suffering from, or being the victim of something, instead of saying is disabled or is physically disabled, but using wheelchair bound expressions like that. We talked about disability appropriation, which is kind of diminishing disability experiences by taking them on for ourselves. In regular discourse, these are some of the more subtle ones, like I must be blind, or he's so ADHD lately, or using disability experiences in light ways that trivialize those experiences. So that was March and April. It's a way to kind of, this is where we are right now, reminding everyone that we skipped a session. So we weren't able to explore some of the more institutional things of being a school district. But here we are with the topic for today, which is huge, and we will do our best. So a disability justice platform for OUSD students. So before reviewing the specifics of that, I want to offer the most commonly shared disability justice principles right now, which were created by Cintya Valid, the organization that I spoke about at the beginning of the session. And these bear exploring on their own. They ground a lot of what's in the platform for OUSD, but definitely far bigger than what's in that platform, or wider application. So the principle of intersectionality, we don't speak about Black students as if they're not disabled. We don't speak about disabled students as if they're not also Black. We really pay attention to the intersection of experiences for individual people in their lives. Race, gender, class, sexuality, nationality, gender, disability, they're always all present, and we have to do that work if we're really gonna be liberatory. Disability justice principle, leadership of those most impacted. I've spoken a lot in this space that I am an ally. I'm proximal to the disability experience. I'm not at the center of disability community based on my experience. So there is a lot of caution and humility in my work right now. And then extension of this work has to happen. So leadership of disability justice work, or of any liberatory work, has to come from those who are most impacted. 3 is hard for a lot of people, but our capitalist systems really marginalizes, destroys people who do not conform in their body minds. So anti-capitalism is a disability justice principle, if anything, a strong critique of capitalism as a system. Another principle is cross-movement solidarity. There can't be a racial justice movement that does not embrace disability justice movements, and vice versa. Disability justice is intersectional by definition. So the idea of wholeness, people are whole in themselves. Everything we do has to have sustainability baked in. We can't burn each other out. We can't leave each other behind. We can't build movements that do not hold the people who are most vulnerable as part of those movements, disabled, elderly, etc. So cross-disability solidarity, we use disabled as a general statement, but autism community is different than the Mad Pride movement, is different than the physical disability movements, is different. We have to have cross-disability solidarity, interdependence as opposed to independence, a culture of care, collective access for everyone of all kinds. And language access is a difficult one today, and I'm going to name that. Disability access is hard. We have to have a notion of collective access and all kinds of access. And of course, there's no liberation if it's not collective. So those are the principles. There's a link in the bottom that allows you to explore them. And there's a beautiful visual that you can print and put on your wall. So here we are. There are 7 commitments in this platform for disability justice for OUSD students. We're going to explore the first one together. And Leilani, I did not mention that we're doing pair share. So I don't know if that's quick to set up, but so that's going to be the first big pause. So we are going to explore the first of these commitments in this platform in pairs very soon. So the first commitment in this platform is open, sustained, and widespread dialogue about disability experiences and disability justice in education. And that has different elements under it, different requirements under it. So to have open, sustained, and widespread dialogue about disability justice experiences and disability justice in education includes, and this is as broken down by members of the Community Advisory Committee for Special Education at this point. And this is a working document, so a lot more can be added and changed. So first, we have to understand why rendering disability experiences invisible or silent is in and of itself ableist. Not mentioning, not what does it do, what is the impact of that silence. We have to bring disability experiences to the surface and require a disability justice lens in all educational dialogues, practices, reforms, and investments. I sit in board meetings a lot, waiting for those moments that never come, waiting for explanations of how new programs, curriculums, investments, et cetera, are going to be accessed by students with different types of disability experiences. So it's important to bring those experiences and a disability justice lens to every instance of our educational dialogues. And another requirement is carefully distinguishing between disability experiences and the system of special education. Avoid equating disabled students with a structure for organizing disability-related services. It is often the case that the moment somebody says disability or disabled, they instantly go to special ed as the holder of everything disability. And it even extends to calling students who are disabled students, which is their experience, by the name of the bureaucracy, which is special education, and saying SPED students or special education students. It's equivalent to calling English learners ELD students as their primary identities or experience, or AMA students instead of Black students, because it happens to be a support that is specific for Black students, Black boys, Black young men. So the collapsing of the structure, that's a structure that provides support with the disability experience itself. Another requirement is showing understanding of ableist language and ideas circulating in our schools' communities. And we went over some of those, and engaging so that when it comes up in regular dialogue, we're able to educate and interact, and engaging in personal ongoing learning about disability and disability justice in education, particularly from the perspective of disabled people who are working for disability justice. So those are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 requirements under this first commitment of open, sustained, and widespread dialogue about disability experiences and disability justice in education. So what we're going to do right now, I'm going to pause for understanding. If there is any one of those 5 requirements that there might be a word, there might be a statement that is not clear, giving the opportunity for people to raise their hands or ask in the chat before we move on.
There's just one question in the chat about the previous slides around language. Kia lifted, what might you suggest if a person uses that language to describe themselves? For example, a colleague who uses a wheelchair specifically identifies as wheelchair bound. I said we proudly support self-determination, but wanted to have you share.
It is right. It is, especially when you're not in that experience. We've had that experience, right? In all, identities, of people choosing language to name themselves. And of course, we support self-determination, and everybody's in a process of self-awareness and connection to community and etc. Of course, a curious question is always a good thing. I wonder why, I wonder why you use that language. I've heard it used in this other way, and and it's a light way of kind of asking and allowing people to land. There was a participant in this session who uses that language for herself and went, oh, which is a beautiful moment, right? Of connection to community and a sense of, disability pride that we are all developing. So I think, suggesting a reading, I noticed that, you use this. And you have to be most delicate, of course, when it's not your primary experience, and especially readings that are, or videos that are coming from people from within the experience. When it's people who are not wheelchair users, who do not use wheelchairs, I think we can cleanly correct and interrupt and say, it's best to say it this way, So, and I think going back to that recording is really useful. There's a lot of content there that can help. So thank you for that question. By no ways am I providing final conclusive answers to anything here, but sharing kind of what the journey that we've been through. Anything else, Leilan, that I should take note of before we move on?
Yeah, I think that was it.
Okay, so here we are. So you have the link. I don't know, I think we should, I should check settings, and maybe you can do it to allow people the possibility of screen sharing within the breakout rooms. Is that something that you can check?
Yes, I can.
Thank you so
allow
much.
that. Yeah. And just one note to Marina. I sent you a link to some Spanish interpreted translated slides.
Mm-hmm. And Marina, if it's a pair share, so I think I don't know, Cintya is both an interpreter and a participant, so that's a possibility.
Yeah,
I will
put them together.
Yes, they can be together. And I appreciate Ms. Obando as a fellow member of the disability justice community, and I'm happy that she's interpreting today because this journey is central to her. So thank you, Cintya, for your collaboration and solidarity. So
I dropped the link to the slides again so y'all can see the questions, because I think now it doesn't transfer over when we drop it into the chat. So let me pull up those slides.
So I'm going to go ahead and share them out loud. After reading this first commitment with its 5, I'm calling them suggestions or requirements. What most resonates for you? What questions come up? And what aspect of school or district experience comes to mind for you? You can answer 1, 2, 3, all of these questions. They're invitations to conversation. So what most resonates for you? What questions come up? And or what aspect of school or district experience comes to mind? So we're going to be in pairs for 10 minutes.
Okay, opening up the rooms.
And we need to take Cintya off the interpretation channel, I think, if she's to talk. Hope it was a very productive 10 minutes. As we come in the room, we're going to take a quick moment to hear 2 voices from the pair shares to share a highlight from your conversation before we dive deep into the rest of this. So I'm inviting a couple of people to say this was the most generative, the most productive thing for us, in our
Gracias
discussion.
por compartir.
Oh,
sorry.
I'm the one who's sorry. I'm going to add Cynthia back, put her back in the interpretation room. Thank you, Cynthia. Although,
Okay.
yeah, so maybe Marina could share if she chooses to. Okay.
Okay.
Starting interpretation. Thank you. So a couple of hands, a little glimpse into your dialogue. Of course, best to share from your perspective for the other person's, what you discussed. Any takers?
I can share.
Hi, Tiffany. Thank you. Go ahead.
Oh, that's funny. Tiffany's hand is raised.
Oh,
But I unmute Kia.
that is so interesting. So Tiffany and Kia. So go ahead, Kia. You start.
Oh,
And you know that I was looking at the word and not looking at my gallery. So that was really trippy.
no
Go
worries,
ahead,
no
Kia.
worries.
You began and then Tiffany can follow.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Hi, everybody. Good almost afternoon. Oh, it is afternoon. Okay. I had the benefit of having a really helpful thought partner. And I was able to just kind of express often I'm very much in a learner's position, very, very much, and how humbling that is and how necessary it is. And how oftentimes as being Black, being queer, being part of the trans vibe, being there's a lot of times I'm in situations where I'm on the impact side of people's mistakes in language, in mindsets, and navigating that, holding that experience, trying to push back on that experience, trying to change my language around it, being the one who's trying to offer or having to navigate out of that. And this is putting me in a very different position. And I'm grateful for it because I think it's going to help me understand what is the response that I would want from someone when I'm challenging them, when I'm pushing back, when I'm holding them accountable to the norms, and try to model that for myself because I'm going to be in a learner's position for quite some time. And just appreciating the humility that it's going to require of me, and then the actual attention, focus, and also just tapping into the why. So anyway, this has been really wonderful for me, and I very much appreciated our time to talk about it.
Thank you, Kia. And available to connect across experiences with myself and others and everybody here. I hope that even though it's a Zoom space, that we introduce ourselves, make connections, and learn outside of this space and relate and organize around outside of this space. So, and of course, looking ahead to next year, because this journey is ongoing. So thank you, Kia, for sharing. Tiffany, take it away.
My partner is actually a teacher, very cool gentleman. We were more on the aspect of learning with this and realizing how this, not just the wording, but the needs that are not being met by the district. Let's just call it that. That was our biggest thing. We're the district doesn't meet the needs, but now we're curious, how many more districts don't meet the need? You guys get it sounds like to me they get it, and he agreed too. You get it on paper. It sounds really good. Oh, we get all this funding for the special education department. We do this, but it's on paper. Those of us that are walking the walk with them and living it, it looks different. The IEP process is a mess. It needs to be better. We just found a lot of things with the district in this that need to be, I guess, they need to be, the process and progress needs to be much better than it is. So that was kind of our experience.
Thank you. You're ready for that universal access conversation. And of course, the district being everything from that individual classroom all the way up to our central supports and services, the schools. And those of us who live within the experience know that every interaction in a daily level, there is an access challenge. So thank you, Tiffany, for naming our context of OUSD and the long road that needs to be traveled. We're gonna move on to dive deeper, right? Leilani and I had a discussion, and when all of you were doing pair share, we're changing things up a little, given the focus of this institute, this whole week-long experience. we're going to ask you to focus on a particular commitment and not necessarily make a choice. But it was supposed to be a jigsaw so that we got some flavor of everything that's on this platform. And of course, it's all essential. But I'm going to go over the ones that we are not going to explore, just for very light awareness. And then we're going to break out into groups to answer questions. And so we're not going to choose one of the 6 commitments. We're going to do a particular one. But the second commitment was about instruction, actual curriculum, instructional practice, instructional time for students and everyone, right? Instruction, learning about disability and disability justice for all students. You know, what does that include? So this third one is about, and that includes teaching students about disability as an integral part of human experience and of all communities. Students who are disabled themselves don't even have a language for their own experience or the knowledge of everybody involved in those experiences. You know, they're not given access as part of learning to other disabled people, to disability history, et cetera. And no one truly fully is in our district. So disability is an integral part of human experience, and as part of our life experience, we like to say you are temporarily non-disabled, all of us, you know, starting with those who start to wear glasses for the first time, like me, who have to make those adjustments, right? Have to adjust to what being in a body means, you know, and the body-mind experiences that come with our lifespan. So disability is an universal part of human experience and integral. Ableism and disability justice as systems, as attitudes, as movements, history, past movements, and positive and empowered disability identities. The youth development work that it takes to be a disabled youth, especially disabled youth of color. So, and current movements, current efforts, current struggles, current communities. So that instruction about disability and disability justice for all students. The third one is promoting anti-ableism as integral to anti-racism and overall educational justice. I'm not going to read that one because that's the one we're going to explore. So in that interconnection, breaking it down, what does it mean? So that when we talk about racial equity and racial justice in this district, it's actually fully inclusive of all students of color, and it's also fully inclusive of all the experiences that students of color are having and all the challenges. So, and the fourth one is universal access for disabled students and families. That is accounting for the full participation of every student, every disabled student in all aspects of school and district life. From that after-school program and that summer school program and that field trip and that leadership group and the way that you move through a site and the relationships that are built, universal access. But to have that access, you have to have accessibility, which is the accommodations, the adjustments of our environments, our attitudes, our spaces, etc., the supports. So that one, number 4, includes a lot of things that will be required for universal access. To provide access, inclusivity, we have to address the resource and other structural obstacles undermining the educational experience of students. And I, for one, I am annually horrified at the way we speak about what is called our special education budget and how that budget is segregated from conversations about budgets in general, how we don't talk about resources that are always lacking from special educators, para-educators, materials, equipment, etc. How we don't do resource development for disability support, whether that be bond measures or grants or whatever, how that we don't address directly the resource and structural obstacles, space for things to happen at schools, etc. So to have universal access, you have to speak about the resource and other structural obstacles. And the sixth one, promoting and expecting a culture and practice of disability inclusion and belonging. And this is the longest one of all the commitments. So having filters for what gets approved in this district, right? To account for who's going to participate, to speak about those self-contained classrooms and what they're really for and how they really operate in relationship to the entire school and district program, to not presume that placing disabled children in a general ed classroom is inclusion. So all that inclusivity means. Supporting universal design, which means designing spaces to be accessible and inclusive from the get-go, spaces and experiences. To end the practice of conditional inclusion. You can only be included if you have a certain threshold of behavior or physicality, you know, like, and that's, you know, you have to behave as a precondition in ways that are acceptable or normal. So ending the practice of conditional inclusion and understanding behavior as communication. These are examples of what's under commitment number 6. It really working against the notion of a competition within education, that you're there to compete with your peers, that you're there to compete for scores, that you're there to be measured against other students, and to define education as promoting individual growth, belonging, and collaboration that benefits everyone, and creating experiences that are mixed abilities, mixed disability experiences, affinity spaces, etc., professional development. All these are within 6. 6 is the longest of the commitments, perhaps because the most time was devoted to developing this one. So, and the 7th, I made the mistake of not writing it here, but it speaks about accounting for what already exists. Because we define this work as always lacking, we devalue the people who are already doing the work and the supportive spaces that already exist. And for me personally, and I can name it here, my son went to 7 schools in 9 years, and not because of anything he did, just because of things imploding and being changed around him. And there was one school, Grass Valley, that was the only fully embracing school experience for my son. A beautiful manifestation that has a long story to it. And in the school closure conversation, no one could tell that story. What has evolved, or at that time had evolved in that space that was supportive? How did that happen? So we are not accounting for things that already exist. So even as we're trying to improve things, we take stock of the people that are doing the work and the spaces that exist against all odds. So that's number 7. That's not listed here. So instead of choosing whether to explore commitment number 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6, we are going to explore 2, which is the one around, and I'm going to put it here just so you could see how it starts. Oh, I'm in the wrong place. 3. So promoting anti-ableism as integral to anti-racism and overall educational justice. There is a strong focus on Black students in that commitment, and you should have the link to the slides. Note that when this list here, there's a link at the bottom of each slide that rushes you to that section. So for number 3, you would just click on that link in the bottom, but it starts on slide 78. If you want to count them, if you want to click on the link, it will jump you to that part. What we're going to do in groups of 4 is projected now, and I will read it. So choose 1 or 2 reporters for the group. Read the text of the commitment together. Respond to the same reflection questions that you did for the pair chair, just to get into the space. And together choose 1 sentence from what you read to share with the larger group. Explain what you, why you chose it. And we don't need to do E, we don't need to summarize because we're all reading the same thing. So we're familiar with it. So discuss it generally using the questions in C, but together choose one sentence from what you read to share with a larger group and explain why you chose it together. So any questions around what we are doing? Knowing that we are running out of time. Apologizing for that. Delan, is it possible to extend a teeny bit beyond the time?
It's up to the folks here.
So let's
Fine with
pray
me.
people stay. Okay. So but let's go straight right in because we don't have the time.
Okay.
I'm
I
going to
dropped
put
the
a clock
slides in
for
the
20.
link. You can make sure to open the slides again.
Okay.
All right, go ahead and let us know if you need any support.
And Leilan, I don't know if you saw my messages around links to the sign-in sheet and links to the, thank you so much for supporting, putting up with how I'm doing things in my flu-ish state. So I think everybody's back now. There are 5 groups you said, right?
5 or 6. Yeah.
Okay, so what Leilan's going to do is going to call by the name of a couple of people in the group, and you know your group, and reminding people that the goal was to choose a quote that you wanted to highlight as a group and to explain why you chose it. If you didn't get to that point, then just share kind of the gist, the nut of what you discussed as a group. So go ahead, call the first group, Leilan.
So we have room 1. We had Gabriel, Kia, Laura, and Sabria. Whoever wants to share up in the group.
We did not. Oh, Gabriel, were you about to go?
You can go here. Go for it.
Okay, I was trying to pull back because I already shared once, but we were so polite in our group. We're trying to spread it out. So I think a quote that came up for us was require and utilize disaggregated data and information. Example, data points for students who are both Black and disabled. And something that someone brought up was how data tells the story. It's like a quote from what was named, and how data can be really impactful, and to actually like have, sometimes to have like a real voice in those spaces, you do have to have hard numbers to sort of like identify the problem, which is totally fair. And as our schools and sites have gotten better at the practice of doing data-driven changes or data-driven leadership, the data can sometimes become background music because we're used to seeing it. And so how do you re-engage data? And I think as someone else was saying, like get a little bit more into the nitty gritty of like the why of why that data occurred. So disaggregate the data and then maybe disaggregate, like personalize the data after it's been disaggregated, like what is creating these situations. And then there was additionally an ask to just know more about the connection between ableism and anti-Blackness, specifically regarding how ableism impacts Black students who are not disabled. And not disagreeing with it, but just needing more information, which looked like maybe session 1 back in 2002. Yeah, okay, thanks team.
We can go right back there next year. Appreciating that, and appreciating that the choices about what is measured for students, it's also part of it. You know, I remember the disability committee wanting reading growth data before instead of reading status, and that whole cutoff of 2nd and 3rd grade and the presumptions of how people develop, you know, and what we decide to measure, you know. So yeah, so data is so hard. Thank you, Kia, for sharing that. I could see how you went straight there. The next group is Leilan.
Yes, we have room 2, Ingrid, Margarita, and Nikki. Me or all of you can share a little bit.
You know, we didn't choose a partner to speak out, but we talked about how we can improve access and resources for students with disabilities within the Oakland School District. And we were sharing our experiences. Margarita, feel free to chime in.
Yeah, we were talking about how we get students with disabilities, and sometimes we don't know how to support them. And we're very grateful that we're having these trainings finally, because in the past, all the trainings in the summer is for just EL math, but now including students with disabilities and how we can support them better. And in addition to what Nikki said, yeah, we were talking about the school district should give equal opportunities in all schools in Oakland, not just some schools. And because we have some parents that know how to advocate for their children, so those schools have all the resources. For the students in East, in West Oakland, no, because parents maybe don't know the language and they don't know how to advocate for them. They're uneducated, and it's something that the parents should not be fighting for. That is the school district support all students equally. We're talking about equality.
Thank you, Margarita. Clearly you were in the conversation around universal access and access to school communities and access by school communities, you know. So yeah, so you're ready for next year to dive deep into that one. But definitely when our geography is racialized, you know, and our school communities, there's conversations around that are deeper around which schools, which students, right? So thank you, Margarita. And what's the next group, Leilon?
In room 3, we have Luz, Melanie, Melissa, and Meredith.
I'll start. And anybody can feel free and jump in if I'm not catching all this. I think we talked about we weren't sure we were that group that we just picked our own. We picked number 3. And I think we did the first quote, but our conversation kind of, you know, evolved as we were speaking. I think the thing for us was the verbiage that we're using and the supports and the labeling that happens with our students and how we actually get there, right? Because like you kind of named that some schools have a lot more resources, but also some parents push for those resources. And in other schools, parents, I don't want to say don't want them, but have had negative experiences. So as soon as you do bring up specific targeted words, there's red flags, and it's like, nah, we're not doing that.
So and leaving it to individual parents, right? Instead of being a collective thing, you know, that the IEP process will solve things. Individual parents must advocate. So yeah. And what happens?
But also explaining to them that it is a system of supports. Because I think that hasn't been the experience for a lot of our global majority parents and caretakers.
Yep. And so pausing to see if anybody, you good? Lucy, for your group?
Anybody else of my team want to?
Does that sound like the sum up?
I'll jump in. I mean, I was actually looking at the slides after we had our conversation, and I just realized how much we were saying that we didn't know we were saying. That's a part of that number 3. So a lot of our conversation was around addressing the stigma of emotional disturbance categories for students with mental health disabilities or neurodivergent experiences. We were talking about that, how once that label is added, a lot of times anything else that the student might be dealing with, there are other factors that are more trauma informed or not addressed at all. The response is clearly based on just the sole or the primary IEP diagnosis, and that's not the whole child. So we were acknowledging that. And also at the C category of number 3, using disaggregated data and information to engage in intersectional disability justice work. We have to remind ourselves and the parents and the district that the whole point of getting this information is to see how to best support these students, not to continue to marginalize them. I think that conversation is not central enough when it comes to the IEP process, the SFT that leads up to it, and so on and so forth. So we were just having a lot of
Thank you,
conversation
Melanie.
like that.
Sounds rich. Okay, so you went many places. And our next group, Leilani, and we're almost getting there to the end.
So far, we had Cintya and Marina.
And I did not ask people to choose the English channel so that it could be simultaneous.
I think I mentioned.
Okay, I need to take Cynthia off the interpretation channel to support. Give me a second. There we are. Manage and end. Okay, Cynthia, you're in the space.
Okay. Yeah, our group was Rosalba and Marina. Nuestro grupo era Rosalba y Marina. Marina, ¿quieres compartir? I don't see Rosalba. Si quieres compartir algo, Marina, y te interpreto.
Está bien, sí. No sé, quería darle el espacio a Rosalba para que compartiera, pero si no, yo puedo compartir. Ajá. Quería que ella compartiera.
Yeah, I wanted to let Rosalba share, but I can go ahead and share. Sí, adelante, Rosalba ya no está. Yes,
¿Ya se fue Rosalba?
Sí, ya se fue.
Pues nosotros hablamos, ¿verdad? De que nuestros niños, ¿verdad? Sean mejor, que tengan mejores servicios, ¿verdad? Principalmente los niños con altas necesidades, ¿verdad? Porque la verdad, igual como en las escuelas, las familias tienen muchas necesidades, ¿verdad? No saben qué es un IP ni un 504 y también les tardan mucho para resolver sus problemas, ¿verdad? Que a veces les tardan de 1 hasta 5 años, ¿verdad? Padres de familia lo han expresado, ¿verdad? Enojados porque imagínense todo ese tiempo no pueden darle esa ayuda a ese niño y ese niño se está atrasando. Entonces sí necesitamos más enfocarnos en nuestros niños de altas necesidades.
Gracias.
Yeah, so yeah, we spoke about the need for better services that need to be offered, especially for our kids with high needs. Their families that have high needs of their own, and there are many families that don't really know what IEPs are or what 504 plans are. There are several parents that I've known that have had problems or have the child doesn't get an IEP until 1 year it was expressed, but then it took 5 years for the child to then be tested and then be provided services. And understandably, parents are really angry, and the child has been without help for that long of time. So we need more resources for kids with high needs.
Okay. Thank you, Marina. I think we have one group left, right, Leilani?
Is Tracy still here to report for their group? Tracy, did you want to report for your group?
And please turn the interpreting on.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. There we go. We're back.
Tracy's not available to share. We could come back. Kim, Linda, and Tiffany. Any of y'all here to share out a little bit?
I think you're our last group now.
Tiffany, go ahead.
Hold on. I'm trying to, sorry guys, I'm trying to go find the slide.
I can share for you if you need something.
I don't know where I put the slide, but we were talking, I want to say we resonated with that first share out for A. We were with that one. We all kind of resonated on the fact that, again, the district has this thing. We talked about a lot of things with the district about them being, they're showing you they're anti-Black, they're, they don't necessarily see the I guess you said the value in the special education kids. Like they lack so many things, but I think our biggest thing was the fact that they don't show any accountability for that. Like you do this harm, you put these kids. We also noticed that, you know, the black and brown kids have this thing where I feel like with them being disabled, they also don't get treated fairly in the process of discipline. We were talking about that. That's kind of where that resonated for us. We feel like they're, you know, they don't think clearly. I don't know if it's they don't read their IEPs or, you know, whatever the situation is, but I was using myself as an example in the group. My son got suspended for something that was in its IEP. It took me forever to literally fight with them to say, hey, this is an IEP. It's in there. Why are you suspending him? But I feel like he was suspended because he's Black and he's disabled. And we were talking about, they're like, you know, they don't hold themselves accountable for stuff like that. You know, the Black and brown get suspended more, or they get a different kind of discipline, and it's not fair. They don't think about it, and they're very nonchalant about it. They, you know, when you're trying to talk to them about this kind of stuff, I wouldn't say they don't seem knowledgeable. It's almost like they're just not there, don't care. You know, it's really the anti-racist, anti-ableist thing. It's there. They do it, and we are trying to hold them responsible. Are we not, Cynthia? That's what we're here to do. We're trying to hold them responsible. So that's kind of what our group was in. We're noticing the trend of how they're just mistreated all the way around, especially when it comes to disciplining them. They don't get fair treatment. You know, I think it's harsh for something that they do that somebody else does, but if it's in their IEP, I think they need to take that in consideration, and they don't. So it's always a constant fight, you guys. It's a constant fight.
Thank you. No, and noting in the slides, Tiffany, you've been in these meetings a lot, that there's a focus on the suspension of middle and high school students, Black disabled students in the special education committee for a reason. And often the nature of a student's disability experience is either ignored because they're Black, or it's assumed because they're Black. So, and an example that really comes to mind is the fact that the autism experience and identity is not one that has been available to Black students, you know, historically. Them being understood as autistic is hard and rare because people do not want to attend to their body-mind experience. So the racialized and even disability assumptions are very specific because you're Black. So, and it's not about this kind of catch-all thing. Oh, don't call our kids disabled. We're going to talk about that next year. The whole disproportionality debate and how harmful it is to Black disabled students. But in general, there's not an disability for Black students becomes invisible, becomes assumed, you know, and it's not supported, you know. So so race and disability combine in really harmful and often deadly ways. So we have to go deep on that one, and it connects to that emotional disturbance category that we brought up, you know. So we don't want to do that work. It's hard work. And so yeah, so thank you for bringing that up, Tiffany, as a focus. And I think that that concludes the share out, right, Leilon?
Yeah, unless Tracy wanted to share.
Okay, pausing.
We're good. Thanks everyone for staying over a little bit.
Yeah, so
drop the exit ticket.
Yeah, summarizing quickly what I would have said here. So next year, our goal is to really dive into those commitments using OUSD case studies. We might even watch board meetings and say, ooh, how is this playing out, right? So it could be micro at the level of classrooms and schools, but it could be at the level of whole district discussions, kind of going into some of those subheadings under each of the commitments with real life stuff from our district. So that is the trajectory moving forward. Of course, there's a lot of new people that come in and regrounding that we would have to do, but just know this is going to become the core of what we do. There is a sign-in sheet, or thank you for sharing it, and a sheet to share your hours for staff to track your hours. So for compensate, I don't understand the mechanics of that, Leilon, so please forgive me for misrepresenting. It's educational credit for education, right?
Which one's the professional growth units?
Yeah, thank you so much. You're
Yes,
right.
we
That's
have.
the right language.
We have PGUs, and then OEA
Yeah.
members can submit for hours as well.
And then there's a feedback form, and I think she already
Dropped
shared.
that already.
And here we are ending our conversation today with a quote. And of course, I always linger to talk to folks who want to. All bodies, all of us, are caught in the bindings of ability, race, class, gender, sexuality, and citizenship. We are powerful not despite the complexities of our identities, but because of them. Only universal collective access can lead to universal collective liberation. This is disability justice. So thank you so much for being here today, for being part of disability justice community in OUSD. I look forward to a powerful year next year. And I'm available if you want to contribute to the development of these sessions. I'm going to put my information. You probably have it through the invite, but I'm going to put my cell number in the chat. And again, I'm Cintya Molina. I'm always working in collaboration. If you are a person who has a disability experience as a staff, who is working to be a model and a person who really leads to self-advocacy and leadership by those most impacted, please especially reach me there so that we can shape these together with the rest of the group. And my email address cynthia.molina@ousd.org. So you can call me or email me. Thank you so much. So that is it for today. Have a wonderful rest of your day.